Hi everyone out in Zoom land. Thank you for joining us again. So this afternoon, I could say, and now for something completely different. Leslie Grigsby is gracious enough to join us today. So we're gonna, I will introduce her in a moment, and then we're gonna have some more artist talks. And then at the very end, we'll have questions again. So if anyone has questions, please keep them and be ready for later. So Leslie B. Grigsby, Senior Curator of Ceramics and Glass, joined the Winterthur staff in 1999 and is responsible for the museum's 22,000 plus glass and ceramic objects. She began her curatorial career at Colonial Williamsburg in Virginia in the 1980s, followed by a decade of publishing extensively on 17th and 18th century English earthenware and stoneware. Her major publications include the Long Ridge collection of English slipware and Delftware, as well as English pottery, 1650 to 1800, the Henry H. Weldon collection, and English slip decorated earthenware at Williamsburg. Leslie's catalog of the English ceramics at Milwaukee's Chipstone Foundation is available online at the Digital Library for the Decorative Arts and Material Culture. If anyone hasn't checked that out, that's an amazing resource. Please look that up. She was instrumental in making the entire Winterthur Museum collection available online on the Winterthur website. That is a pretty amazing feat. Good job, Leslie. Leslie lectures widely throughout the United States, Canada, and the UK, as well as in China and Australia. She has curated numerous major exhibitions on themes such as the histories of dining, tea, alcoholic beverages, and design. Future talks in the works there, maybe. She's also an artist, creating award-winning intricate beadwork sculptures. So Leslie, please join us. We just wanted to note that it is a different presentation, and it'll give us all a really wonderful break and thinking about things in a different way. Can I do this for you, or do you want to do it?
Okay, can you hear me? All right.
Is it working? Close enough to her mouth? No.
I can move it up.
Then?
I can move it up if it needs to be closer. All right,
Great. Okay.
great.
Oh, and I didn't do the thing.
I can do the thing.
No, I
Oh,
won't
that
do the
you
thing.
do that thing.
Yeah.
Okay, the thing that she's not going to do is right after listening to this morning's talks, which I loved. It was marvelous in each case. I asked them if I should be giving the grown-up museum curator talk or should switch to speaking more off the cuff. We have decided that I'll do the grown-up curator talk just for a little bit of style, diversity in terms of speaking style. But I would say I would be giving you a very different lecture if I were giving this to you as an individual presenting an artwork. So I have to lead a little bit of a dual life here. Okay, get everything set. Good afternoon, and thank you for letting me join you today at the Clay Studio as part of the figuring. What's happening?
No, it's because the difference.
I know. This is what I mean, like, right? I'm like, okay. There are a few people here who know me when I'm not being a museum curator. Three of them are sitting together right there. So I'm putting on, okay. Back to the formal demeanor. Okay. It's an honor to be invited to speak regarding an historic object to an audience that's so deeply knowledgeable regarding contemporary craft. Before I begin my talk, and regarding my place of employment, Winterthur Museum Garden and Library acknowledges and honors the Lenape who inhabited the lands of Winterthur and what is today northern Delaware and Pennsylvania prior to European contact. We remember the sacredness of this land for the Lenape, who once made it their home, and for the value it holds to us today. Winterthur is located in the Brandywine River Valley near Wilmington, Delaware, and was founded by Henry Francis DuPont, who, when he inherited the property in the 1920s, already was collecting fine and decorative arts of the types that were made or used in America from the 1640s onward. The museum opened in 1951 and today features 175 house rooms, 2 floors of galleries, and a publicly accessible world-class research library. Our master's program in American material culture and another in art conservation are run in tandem with the University of Delaware. And we're set in a 1,000-acre estate with 60+ acres of wooded garden. The Anna Monument, which we'll be focusing on in a moment, is one of 90,000 museum objects at Winterthur. As a curator, I'm responsible for some 22,000 items, roughly 16 to 17,000 of which are ceramics. This includes over 600 figures that variously were produced in China, Europe, or America from the 1600s through the 1800s. As is true across Winterthur collections, some objects can be challenging to interpret with sensitivity, and you can perhaps see some on the screen that have been interpreted in different ways by the people for whom they were originally made versus those of us looking at it through today's lens. We try to be aware of all of those different approaches to the objects so that we can better understand objects through history. The Anna Monument, which we'll be focusing on in a moment, was acquired in 2021 at Cracker Farm Auctions near Baltimore. The ceramic came to our attention when we were contacted regarding an alkaline glazed jar from Edgefield, South Carolina, made by the now widely known enslaved Black potter David Drake. Though the historical importance of the Drake jar is undeniable, Winterthur already does have a work by that potter, and we chose not to go after it. In part, we chose not to because we knew it was going to reach a quite high price. It is elaborately inscribed for a David Drake piece, and it ended up selling for over $1.5 million. So it's a big deal, and we wanted to, instead to go in a different direction. And our attention was captured by lot number 2 in the sale, the unique Anna Pottery Liberty Monument. The Anna Pottery, located in southern Illinois, was founded by Cornwall and Wallace Kirkpatrick, white men who were born into a family of potters. By the time the brothers set up the Anna Works in 1859, Illinois was second only to Ohio in terms of American ceramics production. The Kirkpatricks primarily made utilitarian wares such as crocks, but also explored more artistic and sometimes bizarre pottery challenges. An 1874 article in a local newspaper says that the Anna Pottery's range of production included, among other wares, quote, ornamental garden vases equal in beauty and durability to anything in iron or marble, which, yeah, maybe not. They might have exaggerated a little bit. They also made monumental urns and headstones for cemeteries and architectural elements such as windowsills, arches, mullions, and other supplies. Active through the late 1800s, the pottery is now best known for creating novel ceramics that sometimes express scathing reflections on important 19th century social and political issues. Particularly large or dramatic Anna works acted as centerpieces to draw prospective clients into the pottery's sales booths at county fairs or markets. Although such objects appeared somewhat rustic compared to high-end ceramics of the period, the Anna Pottery did display at the 1876 United States Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia. This was in honor of 100 years of the United States being in existence as such. Most other American potteries showing there were imitating high-end British, European, or Asian ceramics, sometimes adding iconic American imagery. In contrast, as per scholar Robert Moore, the Kirkpatrick brothers brought with them an outsized stoneware whiskey jug, across which the entire surface was incised the text of the Declaration of Independence. They also brought 2 jugs that were encircled, pierced, and stoppered with tangles of writhing timber rattlesnakes. And this is a type that, for folk art collectors, is what's most recognizable among Anna Pottery works. They also had whiskey flasks that were molded in the shapes of pigs, covered sometimes with incised railway maps. And you would drink out of these from the opposite end than one might want to drink. They had mugs with frogs in them that the frogs would appear as you drained the cup, and they might make noises because of holes and things whistling. And many of these bore poetic ditties that were inscribed to serve as World's Fair keepsakes. Although the Smithsonian Institution did accept gifts of Anna Pottery wares that were displayed at the Centennial Exhibition, the Kirkpatrick's controversial and often politically charged stoneware faded into the background in terms of American ceramic scholarship. Interest in folk art, starting in the 1970s, brought Anna wares back into the spotlight. And since then, such objects increasingly have joined important collections and achieved higher and higher prices at auction. To set the scene for the creation of the Anna Pottery Liberty Monument, we travel back to 5 years after the end of the Civil War, when on February 3rd, 1870, the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified. As you perhaps recall, the amendment prohibits the federal government and each state from denying or abridging a citizen's rights to, quote, vote on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. This is 5 years after the Civil War. Ratification of the amendment was hailed by Black communities, including residents of Colfax, Louisiana. Festivities and a parade in Colfax inspired the publication in faraway New York City of the lithograph that's shown here. The center of the print, which you can see in detail on the right side of the screen, portrays the parade on May 19th, 1870, and it is framed by portraits of important personages, most of them Black, and genre scenes of Black Americans enjoying their rights as citizens. And these were widely collected by not only the Black Americans, but also whites who were in support of civil rights. Events 3 years later, on Easter Sunday in 1873, would prove how little those rights were respected and defended. The published details of the Colfax massacre vary and can be quite confusing, but on that date, an angry white mob killed approximately 150 Black citizens of Colfax who had occupied the county courthouse and were defending the result of the 1872 gubernatorial election in which they had participated. That election had been won by a champion of the recently guaranteed civil rights and voting rights for all. The whites in the community set the courthouse on fire and murdered the Black protesters as they attempted to surrender or flee. Though largely ignored by mainstream history books, the massacre is considered by some to be the worst incident of racial violence during the Reconstruction era. We are as yet unsure which version of the news regarding the massacre reached the Kirkpatrick brothers up in Anna, Illinois, but their visceral and scathing response to the event is clear. Although other themes also are presented, the primary imagery on this unique stoneware masterwork depicts the massacre of Black citizens of Colfax. The massacre is represented at the center and lower right on the monument and portrays two white men, a Confederate soldier and a townsman, likely a Ku Klux Klan member, because we know they were quite involved in this. And they attack a Black family, 3 adults and a child. As viewers today, we are struck by the racist portrayal of the suffering Black family, who are presented with ape-like faces. Though the Kirkpatricks, white men, as I've mentioned, who created the sculpture were agonized by the atrocity, they still were products of their own time, and as such, followed unfortunate conventions regarding race portrayals. The disconcerting appearance of the Black men's legs likely is intended to imitate the rough wool trousers that had a texture to them that were commonly being worn by farm workers. And I can only, to add a personal note, as a Jew, the portrayals of Jewish people and many of us of all different backgrounds can be equally as painful to see. So I apologize to those of you in the audience who are offended by this. Below the Black family, a broadside is inscribed, "Our protection under the Civil Rights Bill." Nearby, another broadside reads, "Freedom in Louisiana." Above and slightly to the back right on the monument, a Black woman is struggling to climb upward. Is she escaping from the dangers below? Or is she struggling to reach and have equal access to the locked voting boxes that are perched near the pinnacle of the sculpture? One challenge to voting was the requirement for proof that voters were over 21 years of age. Most former slaves, of course, had never received birth certificates, so they were sometimes prohibited because of that. The uppermost figure on the monument wears a Liberty cap and commonly is identified as Liberty, who's often shown holding a flag upright. Alternatively, and I believe this to be true, she may represent justice. That raised hand would be perfect for running threads through in order to hold a pair of scales. I think that might be what this is supposed to be. Whomever she represents, that figure at the top is a modified version of a molded woman who appears elsewhere on the piece. That woman's fashionable hat has been replaced with that Liberty cap, and her arm has been raised. She almost certainly was molded directly from a now lost imported Staffordshire ceramic figure. Also near the top, a recumbent lion represents the US government and bears the initials USG for then President Ulysses S. Grant. The inscription below him disparages and references corruption regarding the tax on matches that had been passed in order to refill government coffers during and after the Civil War. The match tax, controversial for placing an undue financial burden on the poor, also is referenced elsewhere on the monument. And the large broadside that we see at the left specifically refers to the Civil War when it states, "The great show cost $3 billion. The Kirkpatricks and many others accused the government of corruption during and after the war. The Credit Mobilier scandal, another example of government corruption, is represented by the remaining figures on the monument. Topping this vignette, a man who's identified by the name Colfax, which is incised on his leg, teeters atop a ladder. Though not at all associated with the massacre, the involvement of Grant's first vice president, Schuyler Colfax, in the scandal made him an obvious theme for inclusion on the Anna Monument, which relates to the Colfax massacre. Simply put, the scandal involved several Union Pacific stockholders who formed the company Credit Mobilier of America to build the eastern portion of the Transcontinental Railroad. Credit Mobilier overcharged the government by $44 million, which went to Union Pacific executives who used $9 million to bribe high-ranking congressmen. Colfax, vice president, was implicated in the fraud, which ended his political career. The Credit Mobilier scandal is referred to by name near Colfax's foot, while to his left, a sign says, "This great height is making me dizzy." Below Colfax, a group of affluent-looking white men and women, as well as a child, appear distressed as they stand near a sign stating, "My friends are falling," an obvious reference to legal punishment for those wealthy who were involved in the scandal. So as I approach the end of my brief time with you today, we travel forward to view the Anna Monument as it is currently displayed as part of an evolving exhibition at Winterthur that's called Bearing Witness. And this deals with many different types of objects and issues of race and politics and oppression across centuries. It is tempting to discuss this unique work in terms of the unusual skill on the parts of makers who typically were producing crocks, jars, and other utilitarian wares. Much more importantly, however, the monument illustrates how vital messages regarding social issues were disseminated via methods beyond published texts and illustrations. Winterthur is working to create a multivocal interpretation for the object by engaging with scholars, students, and others to better understand and share the multi-layered history the monument represents. Many such parties also were consulted before we pursued the monument at auction. We expect the interpretation of this complex object to evolve over time, and we fully understand the responsibility we have when we present the challenging history that the object represents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am going to ask Kelli to read Kyungmin's bio while I find her in. She is joining us from. It's in here somewhere. Oh no. Okay. It's right over there.
Currently, Kyungmin Park is an associate professor. Wait, I feel like I start. Yep. All right. Starting over. Originally from South Korea, Kyungmin Park earned her MFA in ceramics from the University of Georgia in 2012 and her BFA from the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University in 2008. Currently, Kyungmin is an associate professor of 3D studio art at Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts. Park was a long-term resident at the Archie Bray Foundation in Helena, Montana, where she earned a 2014-2015 Matsutani Fellowship and a 2015-2016 Wingate Fellowship. Park has won multiple awards, her most recent recognition being from the National Council on Education and of the Ceramic Arts, which granted her the 2016 Emerging Artist of the Year Award. Ceramics Monthly magazine also gave her that same designation in 2015. Kyungmin was invited as a 2017 guest artist at the Jingdezhen International Studio in Kyungmin, Shaoshan?
Sichuan.
Yep.
Sichuan.
Sichuan Ceramic Park in Jingdezhen, China, and the Air Valorious in France in 2011 and 2022. So welcome, Kyungmin. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi. Well, hi, everyone. It's great
Hi.
to see you all. Actually, I can't really see anybody. I just see Jennifer and then all those screens, but that's good enough. First of all, thank you, Jennifer and Kelly, that make this happen. I know you guys working really hard throughout the whole entire year, so I really, really appreciate it. And thanks for including my work to be part of it. When I actually got an invitational email from Jennifer, I couldn't believe it. I thought there were some misunderstanding. So I called my mom. I'm like, I think they have some misunderstanding here. And then my mom said, just trust yourself. You work really hard. So they probably mean it. They wanted you to be in the show. So here I am. Here we go. So this was the initial idea that I actually presented to Jennifer and Kelly when we met at the first meeting. So I'm gonna read through my first paragraph that I sent it for the catalog. We all went through an unexpected hard time in the past 3 years, as we all agree, and it has affected us in different ways. Many of us reevaluated life, crossing off and rewriting items on our list of priorities. I felt we all were consistently tested, from the COVID pandemic to racial conflicts, wars, and the deepening political divide. I felt my brain was melting and on an emotional roller coaster that I didn't sign up for. That's basically how probably we all felt and how I felt. So when Jennifer and Kelly asked me to create a work for the figuring space, this was my original idea. So as a figurative artist, as we all do, just like Tip said, I am myself is the great model to my work. So I took a picture of myself, and then I wanted to create this wall piece that almost like sucked it into this chaos. And then all the like amorphous form around it would be, all this hardship that we had to go through. And then I titled my piece, How Have You Been / Introspection. So this is the work that I created past years during the pandemic. So one on the left was the work that I made during the AAPI movement was raised. So I got this meme from online called Be Like a Panda. I created a lot of series about this work. So it says they are Asian, they're Black, and they're white. So as an Asian immigrant, we all, went through some hard time. Like we think about who we are, what do we do in this society? So my head was bloated and just, have angry. Sometimes it's so sad and just scary and all that mixed feeling. Felt like my head was melted down. So we all melted as one. And at the end, we're all in it as one, right? So that was all piece about it. And one on the right is called Appletown. A is a letter that you learn, alphabet that you learn the first. That was the first word that I learned to learn English. A as an apple. And then apple in Korean means sagwa. And sagwa also means sorry. So I really like this dual meaning about like the first word you learn, apple, you know, like it to sorry, meaning to sorry, apology. It was perfect theme for me to create a series about it. So each individual apples are representing us, melted together, just, you know, bloated head, you know, all that. So this was fun work to make, and it was kind of meaningful. I learned about myself, and it was, you know, good practice during this time. And then before I created a piece, I always make sketches. And then that's where your original idea is starting to change. And then it was a wall piece. Now I wanted to have another interactive piece that goes with the wall piece that ended up to be the piece that I actually brought it to the clay studio. So because they wanted the life-size figure, I had to like measure it right. And then I had to make sure that everything fits in the kiln. Unfortunately, the time probably Jennifer saw my work for the first time is so to Kelli is the big giant reindeer that I created when I was at Archie Bray Foundation, that I had access to the big giant kiln. So first time they contacted, that was the first thought. I'm like, oh shit, what am I gonna do? Because I don't have those big walk-in kiln anymore. I'm teaching at the liberal arts school, North Shore, called Endicott, and we only have electric kilns. So the biggest kiln that I have is oval kiln at school. So as you know, the height that you can have in those electric kiln is 26 inches. That's the maximum that you can have. So I bought this pole and then marked on each that how tall it has to be, that I cannot go over. And I recently moved to Boston. I mean, I lived in Beverly, which is near the town that I teach, and then I moved to the city of Boston to be close to the culture and people. That means I don't have a kiln access at home. So I have to create a piece in individual section and then drive 45 minutes with non-fire piece back and forth and back and forth. It was, yeah, it was nerve-wracking. And I only had 3 weeks to start and complete the work before I left to go see my family that I haven't seen for 3 years. So imagine my life was just like getting up, work, and, you know, work more and have lunch and work more, and then it's a dinner time. So when I make first 2 tiers, that was my 3rd tier. I don't know if you saw it here. So this was the 1st tier and 2nd tier, and then I will have a figure left, which was an important part of this piece. So I was thinking about what kind of face do I want? I wanted the facial expression that represent my work the most, but also represent us right now at this moment. So the piece in the middle is called 2020 Frustration. And then this, I thought this might be the great model to create this, recreate this piece. I mean, create the piece, but recreating that image. So I use that as my reference. So here I am making face, and then the beauty of making life-size figurative work is that it's almost same size as you yourself, you as a model. As you see on the far left up, that's me working, making my clay head. And I sneaking into school because I just earned my sabbatical. I didn't want to, you know, show up at school randomly because, as you know, students will just run up to me and with a bunch of questions. So I'm like, I need to go at like late night and then load the kiln. So I did that, and then it was like nonstop going to school, fire, bring it back, and working on next year. It was very challenging, but also very rewarding, I have to say. And I get to learn a lot about my own space, figuring space, my own. And then as you see on the left, like it is nerve-wracking, guys. Like you have to put your sculpture, non-fire sculpture, in the box and then pat it, right? And then you put it in your car and drive 45 minutes. Like Kelli was saying that we're all engineers. I was not engineer enough that I hired my fiance to be my co-pilot. So he's been like, yeah, that's him. Very tired after moving my work here and there. Yeah, I had to fed him a lot. good food. So thanks, Matthew. And then, yeah, this was a stage that how I made this piece, like how to complete this piece. So I have to fire again, individual sections, Biz fired it, and then I'll bring it back to build the third figure. And then I will like use the new technology, new phone app to see how I can paint it, what kind of color theme do I want, and then actually apply the glaze and drive another 50 minutes and fire it all in the kiln, hoping that there's no crack or any accident because I gotta go home. So that was very challenging, but again, it all worked out. I'm very happy and proud of what the final result is. So before I ended, I wanted to read the rest of my paragraph that I wrote for the catalog. So let me ask you all a question. What did you miss the most during this challenging time? My answer is genuine human connections, emotional intimacy, and of course, touch or tactile sense, a sense we all are so familiar with. As a ceramic figurative sculptor, creating my own clay figures, which look familiar to humans, requires this tactile sense, touch. Using the medium that feels to me most like human flesh, the whole process of making can be deeply personal and even intimidating. The relationship I have in my studio has helped me keep telling my own stories through my art making process. How Have You Been? Introspection is a self-reflective work that speaks about how I felt over the past 3 years that I think anyone could relate it to. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Kyungmin. Hopefully you could hear the applause. Thank you so much for coming with us here today. And it also was really exciting because Kyungmin drove her piece here in, was it September? So it was really a nice opportunity to, after working for a long time without any actual objects, to really get a chance to see something and to see one of the artists that we'd been talking to through Zoom. So thank you for that heroic effort of bringing your work here. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to look for Roberto in here. Well, Kelly.
Sure. Well, Roberto Lugo is a Philadelphia-based artist, ceramicist, social activist, poet, and educator. Lugo utilizes classical pottery forms in conjunction with portraiture and surface design, reminiscent of his North Philadelphia upbringing and hip-hop culture, to highlight themes of poverty, inequality, racial injustice. Lugo holds a BFA from the Kansas City Art Institute, the Kansas City Art Institute, and an MFA from Penn State. His work has been featured in exhibitions at Crystal Bridges, the Houston Center for Contemporary Craft, Museum of Arts and Design in New York, and others. He is the recipient of numerous awards, including a 2019 Pew Fellowship and a Cynthia Hazen-Polsky and Leon Polsky Rome Prize, and a U.S. Artist Award. His work is found in the permanent collections of the LA County Museum of Art, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, the High Museum of Art, Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the Met, the Brooklyn Museum, the Walters Art Museum, and more. And he is currently an assistant professor at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture in Philadelphia, PA. Welcome, Roberto. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I'm really eager to get this talk out. Can everybody, can you hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can see and you hear me okay. All right, good. So a few things. First, I really wanted to thank the Clay Studio and Jennifer Zwilling at the Clay Studio for putting this show together. It's been really great to work with them. I work with them in a few different projects thus far, and this real institution that gets out to people and kids and communities and really serves the community. So I'm proud to be a part of that. And I also wanted to thank Kelli Morgan, Dr. Kelli Morgan, for the opportunity to be in this exhibition as well. So I've written down a few ideas and thoughts on what I'm going to discuss here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to exhibit my work alongside so many great artists. It's especially important as someone who was born in Kensington to see an exhibition on this subject matter being shown in Kensington. I grew up near Kensington and Allegheny, what many call the Badlands, and what we used to call the ghetto. I use the word ghetto from a place of pride, wanting to represent my culture using traditional methods like throwing pottery and hand painting pottery, but also as an educator, teaching at Tyler School of Art and in a variety of places, including street side with the clay studio and teaching folks how to make number signs at an Afro-Latino Puerto Rican garden of Nitza Sierra and her mother. To me, clay is my identity. It's how I speak, it's how I see the world, and how I struggle with it. In this exhibition, we explored the painful history of bodies on display in American history. My work has explored this by putting people of color in places that have historically been marginalized. I want to tell our story with the hopes that it will inspire others to tell their own. I see clay as the ideal medium to explore these ideas of representation because it's been how anthropology has told us about cultures in the past, like Greek and Chinese pottery. This medium is proven to last thousands of years and to be a great way to document life in a culture and community. It's important that we continue to expand who has a voice in the arts because diversity of thought and experiences make our work that much more significant. When I see orange and black, I see Greek pottery, but I also see prison uniforms. When I see Abe Lincoln, I see a $5 bill, but I also see a blue and white $5 food stamp. Colors, patterns, and symbols are some of the most organic forms of representation. I want to identify what are patterns of the ghetto. This is a complicated place we represent my community while I'm afraid to live in it. Because of the traumas of growing up in this place, I ask myself how I can use my time to represent this community and engage with it in a way that helps provide opportunities to others. Around Philadelphia and among other cities, you will find rest in peace murals for people. These murals serve as a meeting place for people in the community to pay homage to the person being remembered. I find the teddy bear such a moment of remembering the innocence in our loss. Our lives matter when we mean something to people, to a whole community. And when someone is killed, it is devastating to entire families and communities. When thinking about being in this show, I wanted something that would be a representation of how my culture often memorializes lives, while also documenting these shrines in a medium that is known to last thousands of years, so that the memory doesn't die, because we are worth being remembered. We are worth the joy of being celebrated. I wanted to make a grouping of bears of various sizes, just like the shape of the memorials I grew up around. I wanted them to be glazed in a pattern that is also representative of communities like mine. So I thought of the Coogee sweater worn by the Notorious B.I.G. photograph. The Notorious B.I.G. was from Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and used to often say what neighborhood he was from. He was proud of his beginnings. These are complicated because they make me confront a hard memory, but they also bring light to many deaths that didn't have to happen, but also recognizes the sense of community and love in these places that rarely get seen. Kensington is innovative. We make planters out of tires. We use milk crates as basketball hoops. I think my art is functional, whether it's the use of a cup I make or how it functions to share stories from my community. It is an honor to be from this place, and I use my time on earth to be able to make it easier for the next person to see themselves reflected in the arts, both as the makers and the viewers. Thank you. So we still got a little time, and I just wanted to, again, I'm so proud of being in this exhibition, and I think I talked to a couple of the other artists during the opening, and what was really telling was we all had this moment where we asked ourselves whether we deserve to be in this exhibition or not. And I think that's part of a challenge of being an artist is you have so much self-doubt. And I wanted to share that because I think regardless of what stage or how you enter this conversation, whether it's as a collector, as an artist yourself, how you began your introduction to art, I think all of those different forms of diversity really enrich our community. And I think the specificity of having Dr. Kelli Morgan look over this project and what I was trying to do with it, and and have a back and forth and have somebody who really understood what I was talking about is so crucial. You know, I've worked on a couple of exhibitions where I've been able to work with Black women curators like Kimberly Camp, who's also from Philadelphia, and Winnie Owens Hart from Virginia. And, you know, for me, it's so pivotal to have representation, not only as artists, but in the curators that we select and that we work with. And I could see that energy in the exhibition and the work that was selected and the artists that were selected. It's a really incredible show. And if you haven't been to it, you really should.
Thank you so much, Roberto. So happy to have you in the show, and I mean, I feel the same way. I feel really excited that all of the artists said yes, because, you know, that's the curator in security, right? You don't have to agree to be in the show. So we appreciate that.
I always say, like, we have to be so much better. I was trying to project.
Yeah, but you got it. He can't hear you.
But I always say, Rob, like, you know, I think all of us, like, we have to be so much better and so much deliberate about owning our own shine. You know, something that I've always admired about you, even before we met, right, is as somebody who is also from the hood, right, who has loves the museum, right, and loves these spaces, but has a hard time seeing these spaces. The thing that was so sort of freeing for me is when I just started showing up in my Tribe Called Quest hoodie, in my Air Max 90s, not code switching, right, right, you know, just being who I actually am. And I always try to admit, like, to say that, like, for you to, you know, and for all of you, right, to just be like, should we be in this show? I'm just like, hell yeah, you should be in this show, you know, because the work is dope. Like, that's one thing, and that's great. But it's like, we are also all dope, right? And so we deserve those spaces. And we can take up space, you know, in the ways, or in our full authenticity. And so I just kind of put that out to everybody, you know, that's here. And I thank you and all the other artists, you know, for actually giving me, you know, more flame to my fire to do so.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Roberto. Okay, but hang around because we might have questions later. Yeah. Kelly would like to introduce Victoria. Victoria, would you like to join us?
Victoria Walton is an emerging visual artist in Baltimore. She's a 2023 ceramics MFA candidate at NYSCC at Alfred University and has a BFA with a focus in ceramics from Towson, thank you, Towson University. Victoria explores the wonder and complexity of Black identity, creating sculpture and life-size figurative works that center the narratives of women and gender-expansive people. Walton draws from her own life, reflecting on the intersection of her identities, ongoing battles with her health, and background of medical and emotional trauma. She further investigates the impact that historical societal factors and personal experience have on the individual and the Black community. Her work illustrates the conditions that reveal how our environment builds and breaks us down simultaneously, making multi-layered connections between clay and the body. In her practice, she creates space for subversion, emotional untethering, community, and contemplation. Thank you, Victoria. Welcome.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. First of all, thank you so much, Kelly and Jennifer, for extending an invitation to me. I was shocked when I got the emails, like, you know, it's truly an honor to be in a room with people that I've always admired and I look up to in my practice. I am going to get a little deep with you now, so bear with me. I'm going to kind of dissect why I make the work that I do, a little bit about myself and how that shows up in the piece that's downstairs. So I'm interested in the viewer's interaction and the hope that they'll be able to make connections between their body and the sculpted body. So let me go. My work prioritizes the experiences of Black women and gender expansive people, conveying the spectrum and intertwining of beauty, pain, community, and nonconformity as birthright and burden. My ideology has evolved, and so has the importance as the greater environment and the reclamation of our relationship with nature. The body is central to my work, not just in the utilization of the figure, but I'm interested in the intangible and the physical materialization of our human vessel, its presence, how it shifts, how it departs, and its connection to the earth. I cannot divorce the figure from the individual. We are extensions of where we come from, our ancestors, and can be seen as a reminder of stereotypes and preconceptions that people have of us and others like us. This is why the figure is paramount. As Black people, we hold in our bodies the experiences of collective care, the cultural blueprints that mark our habits and traditions, our histories, individual intimate memories, and the effects of navigating racist and restrictive systems. This amalgamation of influences ripples through and sometimes outwardly reveals itself, but always inwardly. So sculpting the figure for me is about capturing compounding realities in a way that honors the beauty and the integrity of the spirit and the narrative of someone's life. I am a disabled artist living with aggressive and painful chronic condition. In the weeks that I've been prepping for today, it dawned on me that my first experiences with body stigma were actually from my childhood and have greatly informed who I am today. I'm the oldest sister of a brother who is 1.5 years younger than me. He ended up being diagnosed with autism when he was a toddler, and we grew up in the 90s where autism awareness was not prevalent, especially also in the Black community. His mannerisms were apparent, especially when we navigated public spaces where auditory and other sensory overloads greatly impacted him, resulting in physical distress and great impairment. Along with my parents, I became a part-time caregiver, particularly attending to him in public school, even at the request of his aide. I was often responsible for retrieving my brother from crowded situations where he was completely unable to control his body. By the age of 7, I had seen what stigma looked like towards people like my brother. The feeling that being disabled is unnatural, and thus society does not want them, and the isolation that comes with that association. I would have never been able to anticipate that I would join this community, but in 2018, I found myself thrown into a world of physical impairment, a long life prognosis, and various medical interventions. I know that my experiences are not singular and are a fraction of what others experience in our community. The piece, Body Stigma, What I Am and Am Not, was an opportunity where disability advocacy was at the forefront of my practice. In this work, the figure is partial and is based on references of my body from the feet to the mid-torso. 2 hands display different qualities of pain, one through surface and the other through engaging the wound on its side. My decision to stop the figure at the torso was to illustrate difference as the backbone of the body. Here, the spine becomes the remnants of a tree trunk and the feet like roots extending into the soil. This soil fills the vessel of the body and also surrounds the piece transporting us and speaks to Blackness and disability as a foundational occurrence in the framework of nature. Various glazes and spray paint are splashed on the body like tar. I wanted a distinction between the brown skin tone and what is thrown on the body. The tar is not placed by the individual, it is placed by invisible participants. The amount of tar as a stigma against the body is intentional and significant, but does not deter from the power of the figure. The tapestry behind it connects to the spine and consumes where the upper body would be. Pulling from such a wealth of experiences has allowed me to speak to the nuance of living in a body that is a source of discomfort to others. In my life and in my studies, I have found an overwhelming silence around the experiences of Black, disabled, and queer and trans folk who identities position them even more on the fringes of society. The aim of my work is to reclaim the necessity of nonconformance in opposition to white cultural standards. The choices we make either add to the tide of stigma or a barricade against it. We have an opportunity to repair and uplift. The cultural and aesthetic qualities of Blackness and the occurrence of disability and queerness are inherent and honest, and their presence and complexity are an extension of the diversity of being alive. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Victoria. That was amazing. I also have to say that photograph was not planned.
It was not planned.
We were taking photos of the piece, and Victoria had that t-shirt on, and the fact that she didn't plan to wear the I am myself means that it is her, she is herself. It works on so many levels, and it's just an incredibly powerful photo. So I'm so glad that just happened. Thank you.
Born and raised in the border city of El Paso, Texas, George Rodriguez creates decorative ceramic sculpture addressing his identity and community. Brought up by his mother and 4 older sisters, George quietly observed the love and hard work needed to maintain his family and his community. His art began to manifest as search for his individual voice. The first in his family to finish college. He received a BFA in ceramics from the University of Texas at El Paso, then went on to receive an MFA from the University of Washington. His world curiosity grew as a recipient of the Bonderman Travel Fellowship, where he traveled the world throughout most of 2010. This travel continues to have a profound impact on George and has helped his community grow. George was recognized as an emerging artist in 2019 by the National Council on the Education of Ceramic Arts, and the Museum of Northwest Art awarded him the Patty Warashina Luminary Award in 2017. His work can be found in the permanent collection of the National Mexican Museum of Art in Chicago and the Hallie Ford Museum in Salem, Oregon. George is represented by Foster White Galleries in Seattle and is the artist in residence at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture in Philadelphia. Welcome, George. Thank you.
There's a little bit of an update. I'm no longer the artist in residence at the Tyler School of Art, but I keep, I've built a lovely community there and feel very welcomed, even though I'm not officially the artist in residence. Yeah, I just want to follow everybody's sentiments. It's like this powerhouse group of artists and curators and historians that have been talking. It's just incredible to be in a space with so much talent. And so, I don't know, just like there's so much emotion in the show downstairs, and it's incredible. So I'll keep this fairly brief, but I make figurative sculpture. I added these 3 images as these self-portraits that I've made throughout my years of making, I guess. 2004 was the first one. I was an undergrad, and that's really how I got into ceramics in the first place. I didn't know what clay was. I didn't have it in middle school, high school. So it really was college. And it was my professor, Vincent Burke, that just kind of opened up some doors and showed me what the material was capable of. So that's a self-portrait from 2004. In 2011, I got my first gallery representation in Seattle at Foster White. And I was like, what am I gonna do? Like, people are gonna see this work. So I went back to self-portraiture as a mean to kind of like, express what I was thinking. And then in 2017, we had a pretty divisive election in 2016. So I made a self-portrait in 2017 to kind of express my my feelings about that election. So, and those are just kind of like a few of the highlights, but all in between self-portrait, self-portrait, self-portrait. So it's too much sometimes. Okay. So I was recently at this Museum of Popular Art in Mexico, and I saw a writing that I really loved that I'm going to read for you before I move on. So I'll read it in Spanish first and then in English. Una de las características que distinguen a los mexicanos de otras culturas del mundo es su capacidad de identificarse consigo mismo. El autorretrato, 1000 veces repetido por los artistas, es un exponente del encuentro con la propia identidad. And what that means is, and it kind of validated my making of self-portraits. One characteristic that distinguishes Mexicans from other cultures is their ability to define their identity. The self-portrait repeated thousands of times by artisans is one way to define one's identity. So for me, I was looking at, I look at a lot of artists, but I also look at craftspeople and like what they're making just to sustain themselves and to make a living. And in Mexico, especially, and I'm sure this happens in other cultures, people are just like reproducing their own face because you kind of know yourself a little bit more and you're able to use that to kind of like continue and move forward. There we go. Of course, every time you come up. I added this image. I was talking with Sergey a couple of days ago, and I also made this in undergrad. And when I finally decided, okay, I'm going to try and pursue clay as a means to make it, I decided, well, in order to do that, I need to surround myself with people whose work I admire, right? So this is a self-portrait. I'm the one in kind of a white shirt with shorts with backward feet. And across from me is Akio Takamori. But in the back is Sergey. So I made a portrait of Sergey. Which, you know, so it's lovely to be in this space. Okay, so I'll move on to the piece downstairs. I'm really thankful that Jennifer opened up the guest artist space on the 3rd floor for me to work. So I was here in October and spent that month creating the piece that you see in the show. And it really, you know, even though I was in there, it really was a community effort. Like I didn't have a space, so I was graciously offered that to like start building. And you can see a little bit of the constructing with slabs. And as I was working, it's, you know, I usually, again, have a plan. I think, Tip, you were mentioning how you, how it was kind of more intuitive and things started to come towards you as you were building your piece. And that happened with me. I had a basic form. I was working off of a small shaman statue. So I kind of knew what the pose was going to be. And as soon as I got to the knees and I saw those patches, I knew that there was going to be a jaguar and a dog. And then as I started to build up the piece, all these other like, all this other symbolism started to show through. And then for just glazing, for me, it's all paint by color. The colors mean something, but it's very repetitive. You know, all the ornamentation is repetitive and all of the painting is also this like very easy paint by numbers almost. And I will just say that the 3 techs in this building have been like phenomenal because they really helped me, you know, get the pieces into the kiln fire. So like my deepest gratitude goes to them for assisting me with this project. So as I'm like including some of the symbolism in the work, I was able to visit the city of Teotihuacan, just north of Mexico City. And I've been using statuary from that site to influence my work. So the piece that I made in 2017 of the self-portrait is directly referencing small stone sculptures from Teotihuacan. So I had the opportunity to go this December and actually see some of the pieces, but I worked on the Quetzalcoatl, which is a feathered serpent, and it's a life giver. So the placement of it was kind of determined, a little bit of the symbolism of, bringing life into the world. Again, I won't go through every animal, but like the jaguar and the different interpretations throughout Mexico and how playful they can be, but also a little grotesque. And, there's a lot that goes with humor and just like the feeling that you get when you approach these artisanal objects. So I try to embody that a little bit in my work. And when I was in, working on the piece, I called one of my good friends, Gustavo Martinez, who I was like, I made this thing. I need to figure out like why I made it. How can I talk about it? And we started just having a conversation, and he's very spiritual. And he said, like, oh, I included a jaguar and a solo, and I included an eagle and a rooster. And he's like, oh yeah, this animal means this means that, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, oh yeah, you included everything that is like circular in life. And it's because it's part of your blood. So it just intuitively comes out. And in Mexico, there you go. And in Mexico, the hands of the sculpture are open. So I initially thought, well, maybe I'll leave it completely open so you can't tell if it's giving or receiving, right? There's nothing in there, it could be either. But then I thought, well, I want to bring something back from ancestral lands. So just south of the city of Oaxaca is San Bartolo Coyotepec, where they make all this beautiful black earthenware pottery. So I was there just looking again at the crafts, but with the intention of finding a vessel that I could bring back that the sculpture could hold. So tying it to those lands. And then inside the bowl, one of my favorite people, good friend, Akio Takamori, taught me in graduate school. He, again, I can't say enough about him, but he also gave me his clay body recipe, which I like gladly share with anybody. But it's a clay that's kind of like helped my career along, because it allows me to build large scale work very quickly and also in a manner that I enjoy. And he unfortunately passed away about 6 years ago. So in the bowl is his, the more contemporary ancestors. And the piece is titled Memoria Ancestral, which is like ancestral memory. So thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you.
So we have a video from Roxanne that's about 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm Roxanne Swentzell. I was born in 1962 and am a member of Santa Clara Pueblo, a tribe in northern New Mexico. As a child, I had a speech impediment that didn't allow me to be able to pronounce words, so communication was frustrating. My mother was a potter and handed me clay at the age of 4, and I began to sculpt what I wanted to tell her. I showed her my thoughts and feelings through small figurines. My clay language grew as I grew, and even though I eventually learned to talk, I still found talking through clay spoke volumes more than words. I've never stopped talking through clay. I think that what makes my work different from other artists is that I wasn't making art. I was trying to talk, and it's still a way of communicating. Watching the potters of my tribe, I learned to coil and scrape my pieces. My mother taught me how to dig clay and process it, how to fire both in pit firings and in kilns. I passed this knowledge on to my daughter, and now her daughter loves to play with clay next to me as I work. She was excited about my piece I made for this show. When she saw I had finished the baby, she ran over to see, but stopped in horror and turned to me saying, "Grandma, something is terribly wrong." I said I agreed. So the piece I made for this show is called "Put Down the Man Baby." She stands with great fear. She knows she has to put him down. Her fingers start opening slowly. All the reasons why she's held and put up with this overgrown baby floods in, and she's afraid of his wrath, but she still has to put him down. The situation is unsustainable and is destroying her life. The man baby screams with rage at all the things he's upset with, never having had to take responsibility for his part in it, because she's been holding it for him, never allowing him to grow up. They haven't seen what they've done to each other in their unhealthy relationship. Who is your man baby you've been holding, catering to, protecting, so they don't have to know the truth about how you really feel or what they are doing? Is it your father, your mother, husband, wife, children? Are you ready to put them down? This piece was very hard for me to make emotionally. I lived through so many feelings that were extremely uncomfortable, but I needed to face them head on like this. Once I had gone through enough of the fears, I was able to share it with others. It was interesting to watch people's reactions. Everyone showed surprise and then either went into a state of denial, pretending they hadn't seen it, or cheered it on. I did choose to make the baby a man instead of a woman because of my own experiences of having most man babies in my life be men, but I'm very aware of it being different for others. I did want women, myself included, to take a good look at our part in why these men are stunted. They were raised by women, married women, had daughters, who all allowed them to get away with bad behavior. Why? If they have to grow up, we also have to do our part and believe we can survive standing up. We are stronger than we think, and those men can grow and become good men. You can check out more of my work at the Roxanne Swentzell Tower Gallery, or go to my website at www.roxanneswentzell.net. With this piece, I put out a prayer of thoughtful, loving intention for human evolution. May we be kind to ourselves and each other as we face our demons and dare to grow so that we can make our world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you to Roxanne. I will do the post bio. Roxanne Swentzell was destined to be a talented artist. Her family is full of renowned potters and sculptors. Her talent was recognized early, and she was given the opportunity to spend 2 years at the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe before graduating from high school. She then went on to the Portland Museum Art School. Her first piece of art was a clay dog at the age of 4. After formal training and the development of her own style, Swentzell began to create full-length clay figures that represent the complete spectrum of the human spirit. She feels that many people are out of touch with their environment and hopes relating to her expressive characters will help them get back in touch with their surroundings and feelings. Her figures represent a full range of emotions and irrepressible moods. Swentzell focuses a lot on interpretive female portraits attempting to bring back the balance of power between the male and female inherently recognized in her own culture. Additionally, she increasingly uses a powerful sense of humor to communicate. Her work is in such high demand that people line up by the dozens at her booth at shows like Santa Fe Indian Market, where she won Best of Sculpture in 1999 with a larger-than-life bronze. Though steeped in her own culture, Swentzell's work demonstrates an astounding universality, speaking to people of all cultures. And then lastly, I'm going to briefly show you Chris Rodgers' work. First, the work that's in the show, which is called An Arm Bent Back. It's called this because Chris has been interested for a long time in the sculpture, the Laocoon, which is a Greek sculpture that was rediscovered in 1506 in the hills around Rome. And it is said that Michelangelo was present when they uncovered the sculpture. And it is one of the things that's pointed to as helping the birth of the Renaissance. People were obsessed with this sculpture, and they knew exactly what it was because it had lived in a poem. So there was a Greek poem that had been written about the sculpture because it was so revered in its own time that the Romans during the Renaissance already knew about it. So as soon as they saw the kind of twisted, anguished face, they knew immediately that it was this figure of Laocoon and his sons. There are various versions of the story, but one of them is that Laocoon tried to warn the Trojans that the horse should really not be brought into the city. He thought it was a bad idea. They didn't listen to him, but it is said that the gods were angry because he was interfering in their plans. So they attacked him and his two sons with these serpents who were devouring them. And when it was first discovered, many of the limbs were broken off, including the arm that's behind Laocoon's head. So the initial interpretation was that the arm would have been outstretched. And so that's how it was reconfigured. And then in the early 20th century, through further archaeology, it was found that in fact it was supposed to have been bent, or originally was bent back, which was an even more kind of tortuous stance. So Chris was really interested in the idea of interpretation of artworks over time, which I think has a lot to do with the exhibition, and we'll get to that in a moment, but the idea of who gets to be in the space, who gets to have their figure in space. So for Chris, one of the things he's interested in is interpretation. He took a 3D scan, which he could find on the internet, of the figure, and he put it through his computer-aided design program and twisted it further, and then printed out a small model of his manipulated version, and then hand built the large scale thing based on his 3D model that he printed. So he's using, and as Helen pointed out, he's using the hand, but he's also using technology. Not only the fact that we can have a scan of this thing that's across the ocean, but that then he can change it further. And that is related to the idea that when it was found, they didn't know what it was supposed to look like and they had to interpret it themselves. So that is a little to do about Chris's sculpture. And then of course, I'd like to read his bio as well, since he was not able to be here with us today. Chris M. Rodgers is a native of Charleston, West Virginia. He earned his BA from West Virginia State University. He spent several years teaching English in Beijing, China, before continuing his education at Kansas State University through their post-bac program, and then on to study ceramics at Tainan National University of the Arts in Tainan, Taiwan. He earned his MFA at the University of Arkansas in the spring of 2019. Rodgers has most recently attended several artist residency programs, including Curator Rome, Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts, Oxbow School of Art, Michigan, Casa Luz Tlalpan, Mexico City. He was awarded the Governor's Purchase Award of the 2019 West Virginia Juried Exhibition, and he is a resident artist here at the Clay Studio. Okay, so now I would love to ask if anyone has any questions, and maybe Kelly will come back up and join me. I think if it's okay for, I'm just gonna, my observation, oops. Something that I've been thinking about since we began talking. Sure. We're gonna switch slides. Okay. Is and things that I've been scribbling on my page are about deserving space, but I think Kelly will talk more about that. So the expressions on people's faces. So Jonathan talked about this, Sergey talked about this. Other people have talked about the idea that you're making something that's going to last. It's ceramic, just like the Layaka one, thousands of years later that we're looking at. And you have to choose. Do you want to put that anguished expression into the world that's going to stay there? Or do you want to think about joy? And when we figure this space, we are making the world the way we want to see it, which is what we had the privilege of doing as curators, and seeing that the artists are making those choices too, and hearing that you do want to represent reality and that that's really important, but that it's also important to make the world as we wish it were.
Yeah, and that's like a deliberate.
I'm going to put this on you because
Conscious choice.
evidently you have a softer voice
I
than I do.
I was screaming on Thursday and still nobody heard what I was saying.
Is that better? Can you guys hear me?
But yeah, yeah, that's a deliberate conscious choice. I talk to people all the time, right? And they're just like, when is this going to change? Or when is that going to change? Or this idea that there's like a set equation, or like a rule or an instruction manual, right? Like you're going to come across something and then you're going to know, all that's going to be done. Or like struggling with my undergrads sometimes, who are just so angry because they're like, it's wrong, Dr. Morgan. And I was like, and nobody's cared that it was wrong for 300 centuries. So I don't know what to tell you, like it's not going to stop, right? Just because something is inherently, harmful to people. And so you, me, we, have to make that conscious decision to say, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. Whether it's something as simple as like recycling, or like, okay, yeah, I'm going to actually use the reusable bags, to literally divesting. Like Bell Hooks has this really great, it was an interview she did with Charlie Rose in like 92 or 93. And I'm paraphrasing, but she said like white supremacy informs what we all think all the time, and so we have to consciously deprogram, ourselves from that, for our lifetimes, basically. It's like the only thing that we know. And so that has to be a conscious choice to do the different thing, on a day-to-day basis. And not everybody wants that responsibility, which is fascinating, right? But everybody wants the difference, right? Everybody wants the better thing. And so that was, something that I think we were really interested in and like kind of adamant about. It was something that the artists were as well, to say like, it's not going to change itself. It's just not. It would be great if it could. We wouldn't be standing here talking about this right now if it did. You think of all the people, who've done the work or who've made these comments over just the 20th century, right? Not even talking about the people before that, and it's still a thing, right? It's still a struggle, and so it's continuous, and it won't actually shift, until we shift it. I call it the blast work, where we're just kind of blowing the holes or blowing the walls open for younger generations to continue like that path forward. And, it's something that I'm, very much so committed to. I'm exhausted. I can say that, right? But that commitment to show up, right? To show up for yourself, to show up for your community, to show up for your family every day is necessary.
Yeah, thank you. We'd love to have questions or maybe more comments from any artists. We have we are ending on time, so we actually do have time for conversation, which sometimes gets left out. Lisa, I just saw your eyes. I was like, Lisa has a question.
I just wanna, it's not a question, it's expression of gratitude to both of you and to our place to your community for.
We got
Are you gonna
mics.
say thank you? You wanna talk?
Yes. Yes. Turn it on. It is. It's very low.
Oh, turn it off and on, isn't it? Yeah. It's called the most, I wanted to say thank you to Jennifer Zwilling. And I love it.
Thank you.
And to the artists and part of this. Being an artist who is working in my own private studio and also educating people in my studio up in Frenchtown, New Jersey, to come here to have this mecca. It just makes me feel, oh, yeah. You know, it makes me feel less alone. Sometimes I feel too.
Yes.
And I don't want to hide that, but it's hard to live in the world when you feel so complete. And so to be here, hearing all the artists people today. Yeah, thank you so much. Anyone put anybody else on the mic? Danger. Nobody else? Everyone's just ready. Oh, Leslie.
Sorry, I don't know if it's something that would interest people here, but. Okay, is it coming out of there?
It is.
Hold it
Close to your mouth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's serious. This is just a thing for artists who are interested perhaps in doing research regarding radio objects as well, and obviously pieces like the Aquan, which is one of my favorite sculptures in the world, is looking to the past for inspiration. But we do have grants that are given out at Winterthur, and people come anything from 1 week to coming for many months at a time. I think we've had people come for up to a year in the past, but the applications we usually do in January. But it is something that we are increasingly having, not only scholars who are a little more from my kind of background, but also contemporary craft people, fine artists, as well as people doing a whole range of works, collaborations are open too. So just so you know that we're lucky that we come. Also personally, I'm happy to take people around for the things, rather than glass and money thing. But sometimes we can arrange if there are groups that wanted to come and wanted to go in and see particular types of objects or particular design trends or particular things, then we can help you as well. So. The question is, are grants available for independent educators as well? Absolutely. And we have a longer tradition of that, whether they're getting their PhDs or scholars at all levels, novices who just want to learn more. Sometimes will come, there is competition for the grants, but we love giving them out and we're constantly increasing. Yeah. Thank you.
You want that? It's the, what was the partnership about? Is there a partnership with Princeton?
Oh, the question is about partnership with Winterthur. Yeah, Leslie and I have been talking and with Kelly about I guess I can expose this part. We were trying to find a piece that we could have that we borrowed from Winterthur to put in the gallery, and because the back door opens to the garden, we were not Winterthur, the standards for loans, we don't meet the standards.
Our insurance, we actually discussed the Anna Monument, which sadly we couldn't put out because it's gotten so much attention that it's sort of a centerpiece now, but we discussed several other objects. Problem is that our insurance is based on the fact that we provide a certain level of security for objects. And some of it, we were able to push aside the obsession with it can't have too much light, it's gotta be the right temperature, right?
It's so great.
But the issue was not having 24-hour security was one thing that our insurers wouldn't let us do. And also having direct access from the gallery space to the outside, no buffer. So I think that's probably not uncommon among the accredited museums.
Yeah.
But there are collectors and all who we all know who love to share. And so we can always add a central switchboard to help get things out and get points made if needed.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, does Winterthur allow copies being made, direct copies, molds?
Molds made from the collection? I'm gonna say no.
They do.
They do. Wow.
They do, but it's something, it's on a piece by piece basis. We do, it depends on how and why it's being made too. We do a lot of work with licensed products. Ramada Hedda, Ramada Hedda has reproduced certain things. We work with them, they sign particular types of agreements. We do have, one reason why some of the artists come to us is to work directly and to copy things. Typically, they're copying, using calipers, measuring things carefully and not taking molds directly off objects. But we have some glass artists who are, I think, going to get approved. Anna Booth.
Oh, yeah.
Anna Booth and Diana. Sorry, the last name is escaping me. But I believe they're coming. Hopefully, I'm not speaking out of turn. But they are interested in perhaps making molds off of things. We'll set them up with our conservation department. We train the conservators who, for example, are the British Museum, the Met, and all of that. So we can work together to try and solve certain types of problems, but it's always piece by piece. Sorry, it's a long answer.
No, that's great. That's great. Good to know. That's why we're bringing different people together and having partnerships so we can learn from each other. Yeah. Okay, well, I think that, oh, wait, more questions. Sorry, one more question.
You had said that you would make Helen's list of artists available from 40 or 50 years
Did
ago. Right?
I said I asked for it for my archive, but I guess if she's okay to share it, I'm happy to share it with you. Yeah, okay. Great. We love the top of your head, Helen. Even though we don't get to see it very often. Okay, it's definitely time to stop. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank everybody.
Thank you, Zoom people. The recording will be made available soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.